Okay, so everyone, my name is Qing Lin. I'm the president-elect of New York State TESOL. I want to extend my warmest welcome to all of you. Let me see if we have any EB members here. Okay, so I guess they are still teaching. Okay, so before we proceed further, I would like to say a few things about New York State TESOL Association. As a nonprofit organization, New York State TESOL has been serving TESOL professionals who work with culturally linguistic diverse populations. Last year, we just celebrated our 50th anniversary. Ironically, because of pandemic, we also have seen a tremendous increase of our membership, especially in the international membership. So I'm proud to say that this organization is international scope. So please feel free to tell us where you are greeting from in the chat box. Okay, so Nice TESOL has a webinar all year round to keep you in step with the current trend and emerging issue in the field. They are totally nice special interest group, such as adult education, high A, elementary, secondary, special A, bilingual A, applied linguistic, technology learning, and teachers A. So joining a SIG is a great way to build and strengthen your specialty in certain area, and you can recommend any speaker that you are interested in, or give one webinar yourself. In addition to webinar, we have all year round. We also have our annual conference scheduled for November 4 to 6. This year, we are planning a hybrid format. So the theme for this year is looking forward, educational empowerment and transformative education. So please check out our call for proposal for more detail. The call for proposal will stay open until April 15. Last, please follow us on social media to receive updated information from us. We are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. So just search Nice TESOL and you will find us. So today's webinar is titled Guiding Principles and Best Practice for Dual Language Education. And our speaker is Dr. Buttaro. So Dr. Buttaro is currently a clinical professor of TESOL and bilingual education in the Division of Curriculum and Teaching at Fordham University. Dr. Buttaro was formerly chair of bilingual and TESOL and bilingual advanced certificate program at Touro College. She has taught the international in Mexico as well in Japan and Argentina. She is a trilingual, fluent in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Italian, and with conversational skill in French and Japanese. Her area of expertise is teaching English as a foreign language and English as a second language and bilingual and dual language education. She has also been a teacher trainer in the area of bilingual education, multicultural diversity, and Spanish methodology with New York City Public School. So without further ado, I welcome Dr. Buttaro. Dr. Buttaro, the floor is yours.
Okie dokie, great. Let me share my screen. There we go. Okie doke. I would like to try to make this as interactive as possible. It is a lot of information to digest, and we will have some opportunity for a sharing of a Q&A towards the end. So make sure that you jot down some of the questions, but if there's something that's really, really pressing, please feel free to interrupt. I really don't mind at all. I've been working with dual language programs in the New York City public school arena for quite some time, and actually helped implement quite successful dual language programs for 3 particular schools, one located in East Harlem, one located in the South Bronx, and one located in Far Rockaway. So these are mostly high needs, low income areas, and the target language for these particular dual language programs was Spanish English. So the research says quite a few things about bilingual education. So instead of going through all the bullets, and I do want to clarify that I will be sharing this PowerPoint with all of the members. I was even telling Dr. Lin that it would be great to even have a follow-up session, because to have the flow and to have that level of continuity is what helps people process all of the information. So the research indicates a whole bunch of things about, the strategies and the best techniques that you can implement for a successful dual language program. But I do want to emphasize one important takeaway. This is what I call the pearls of wisdom that I would like to share with you, okay? In my experience prior to COVID, some of the schools that had implemented a dual language program wanted to stop teaching in Spanish in this case when the time came for standardized testing in English. And I remember speaking to the administration, letting them know that if we were to go that route, you're not really being faithful to the program, and you're not really being faithful to the model. So regardless of whether or not the kids were exposed to standardized testing, you have to maintain the flow, because the indirect message that you're giving the kids was that English was the more powerful, the more important language compared to the other one, in this case, Spanish, but it could have been, Arabic, it could have been Polish, it could have been Russian, and so on and so forth. So we also found that people were experimenting with a variety of models. You've got the roller coaster model, where in some schools they wanted to do 1 week in English, 1 week in Spanish, and so on and so forth. In other school districts, they wanted to do 1 full day in English, 1 full day in Spanish, with alternate weeks, right? So let's say week 1, you would have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Spanish, Tuesday, Thursday, English, and then you would alternate. The following week, it would be Monday, Wednesday, Friday in English, and then Tuesday and Thursday, it would be in Spanish. So I'm going to talk about the pluses and the minuses of all of these formats. Because like I said, it was, in a way, it was experimental. People were open to trying different things until they found a format that was conducive and elaborate and successful for that particular school building, right? So sometimes people think, well, this is what they're doing in X, Y, and Z district. Let's copy the model. But you have to make sure that you understand the background of the student population that you're working with. You also have to make sure that you have a good plan for marketing, because you have to make sure that people know about this. So how do you get the information out into the community? And I would be more than happy to share with you really cool brochures that we put together in one of the school districts in Queens that was in 2 languages. It was in English and it was in Spanish. So we wanted to also color coordinate it. So the information that was in English was in blue, and the information that was in Spanish was in red, right? Because we would follow that format. Another way that you could do this, and we tried this in one of the school districts as well, was exposing the kids to 2 languages throughout the day, but alternating. So let's say the morning was in Spanish and the afternoon was in English on a Monday, right? And then on Tuesday, the morning was in English and the afternoon was in Spanish. In another school, they wanted to do all mornings in one language and all afternoons in one language, but I felt that that was not really fair. Let me tell you why. The second language, in this case Spanish, was delegated to the afternoon, but the afternoon is when you would have lunch. That's when you have your specials. That's when you have your art and your music and your gym. So then how much academic language were the kids getting exposed to? So like I said, it was quite experimental, but we learned as we went along, and that is how you make the program better. So language allocation, it was important for the staff and for the administration to understand that you had to assess the child's language in all 4 domains in both languages. So if you are assessing the listening, the speaking, the reading, and the writing in English, right, and you are designating whether or not the child is entering or emerging or expanding or commanding, we had to do the same thing in Spanish. So what is the child's level of listening, speaking, reading, and writing in the Spanish language. So it became a massive amount of work. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what the goal of a true dual language bilingual program is. We want to make sure that we are helping these children develop skills to become bilingual, biliterate, and bicultural, or multilingual, multiliterate, and multicultural, because a lot of them do come from backgrounds that are not necessarily of Spanish speaking. We did have a couple of kids that were from Brazil, so their main language was Portuguese. So they were exposed to English, Portuguese, and Spanish. And that's why I think it's important to talk about multi-literacy skills. So we wanted to also make sure that the teachers understood cross-cultural awareness. It wasn't just a question of teaching the language, but also the cultural aspect of what it means to come from anywhere in Central and South America, from Mexico all the way down to Tierra del Fuego. And in my experience in working with dual language programs in Port Chester and in Yonkers and other areas of Westchester County, together with New York City, we also found that it was unfortunate that a lot of the teachers felt that they had to translate the material. So once again, now we have lack of authenticity. Not that I want to plug in publishing firms, but if you're familiar with Lee and Low Books, they have a very, very fabulous array of texts, and they are written by native speakers. And when I spoke to Abraham, one thing that attracted me to his presentation was the fact that he divided it by categories. So if you would like to have authors from Chile, or you would like to have authors from Venezuela, or from Uruguay, or from Costa Rica, you can actually locate the country and bring in genres and different types of texts from a variety of backgrounds to satisfy all the students. Okay. So this is one of my favorite slides, right? What is the benefit of a dual language program? And I wanted to go beyond the educational aspect. Of course, we want the kids to develop, what the literature identifies as CALP, the cognitive academic language proficiency in a second language, right? But we don't want it to have a detrimental effect on their primary language. So once again, it is not a remedial program. See, a lot of people tend to think it's remediation. We're not talking about remediation. If you take a look at dual language programs in South America and in Europe, both languages are seen to have equal value. And when I first started conducting research on dual language programs, I started comparing what we had here in New York with what I had seen in Canada. And it dawned on me that, wow, the ones in Canada seem to be really, really successful compared to what we had here in New York. And believe it or not, a lot of it had to do with the value and the respect for the language. So if you cross the border from Vermont, right, into Canada, French had equal status to English. And unfortunately, we did not, and in some schools, we still do not have that with the Spanish language. It does not have equal status to English, which is unfortunate. So we're trying to work on all of that. Sociocultural benefits, people that are exposed to the different conventions of languages, right? And you have the proficiency in 2 languages. Now you are expanding your world, right? Because you can communicate with the English-speaking world and the Spanish-speaking world. The economic one, and I can mention a real live example. I have a brother who works for the Secret Service in the United Nations in New York. And the simple fact that he is fully proficient in the Spanish language in all 4 domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, that was a bump of $10,000 in his yearly salary compared to his monolingual colleagues. So there is a benefit. One thing that I did not mention, and I as I'm speaking to you, I'm thinking that I should have added this, but that's what makes the process interesting, that you polish it as you go along. Another benefit of a bilingual program or a dual language program is a medical aspect. So we're moving beyond, you know, the educational, the cognitive, the sociocultural, the economic. People said to me, even in my classes, they said to me, what are you talking about? What do you mean the medical field? Well, there's been quite a bit of research conducted on the brain of the bilingual person opposed to the monolingual person. And it's been proven that bilingual folks or multilingual folks do not suffer from Alzheimer's or dementia as much as monolingual people. So you could hear crickets in the background. There was dead silence, and my students, you know, you had to give them a chance to process that. So once again, the malleability of the brain, for that simple reason alone, it's something that we should focus on, right? So what a bilingual program is not? It is not a subtractive model, okay? We want these kids to enhance their native language skills, and we want them to develop balanced bilingualism, functional bilingualism. Some of them might be, as in my case, a simultaneous multilingual, right? So I grew up speaking both Italian and Spanish pretty much at the same time. I am of Italian background, but my mother is from Argentina. So we speak, we speak, we'll continue to speak both in Italian and Spanish at home. And English was acquired at the age of 5 when I started kindergarten back in 1968. I'm dating myself here, right? So in that case, I was a sequential multilingual learner, right? Because the Italian and the Spanish came first, and then the English was added on top, hence the term sequential and not simultaneous. These programs are not remediation, they are high quality programs, and they're not compensatory programs either. We want to educate first class students. So this is where we get a chance to reflect a little bit. I would like to hear from the audience, since I don't get to see you too much. If you are in a program right now, I'm curious as to what it is that you are doing. What do you think is working for you right now? What do you think might need to be changed? What would you like to see done in your respective school district? What would you like to see more of, and what would you like to see less of? So I'm going to remain quiet for just 3 minutes or so.
So Dr. Buttaro, you want them to,
I'm sorry?
you want them to enter their responses in the chat box, or you want them to speak?
I'd like to hear their voices.
Okay. So feel free to turn on your microphone if you want to speak.
We don't have to tackle all 6 bullets, but you know, maybe 1 or 2 before we continue, because I don't want to be the only one speaking. And by listening to your comments, it will give me some idea as to how I can guide the rest of the webinar for you to meet your needs. Okay, Charlotte, I see you have a raised hand.
Yes, hi. So I teach adult ed for Farmingdale College, in addition to another program on Long Island. And
Cool.
hi, and I work for the EOC, which is the College and Career Prep Center. And so for years, I have been noticing that the beginning English level adult students were even below the beginning English. They were at the real introductory level. And so at that time, a few years ago, we began our English levels at level 1, because we did not have the numbers to support opening up an introductory class. So fast forward to a couple of years, I was happy to see that we were finally able to incorporate an introductory level, because I found that students who were in that level 1 class, but who weren't ready, for all the reasons that we mentioned, they weren't ready cognitively, they weren't ready emotionally, they weren't ready educationally, they weren't ready for their economic reasons, perhaps their work status, their family situation. So that introductory class I found was really benefited them in having a solid basic English.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then in addition, as part of the EOC program, after students complete the ENL program, then they're encouraged and they take tests in order to participate in our other programs like the high school equivalency classes, business classes, CNA classes, pharmacy tech, PTA, you name it, there is a whole college and career prep. What we were finding is that the English language students who really struggled in the ENL levels had that much more difficult time moving on to the next step. So what we wound up doing is, thankfully, we had, before students began the CNA program, they first have to know all of that, the medical jargon, all the medical vocabulary, right?
Right.
So what we did is we had a bilingual teacher help them during the off classes.
And it also sounds like what you had was ESP, right? English for specific purposes when it comes to the adults.
Yes, yes, exactly. So that's what I have found. So I found that I'm happy to say that there were improvements along the way.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I really do appreciate that. I'd like to share this slide as well. Throughout New York, we had the 50-50 model, right? That would start from kindergarten. And if you're familiar with the research done by Virginia Collier and Thomas Wayne, they would talk about the 90-10 model, which seems to be that much more successful. And to be honest, the entire group, I would have to support their research. I found that if we start with the 90-10 model and you expose the kids to total immersion in their native tongue, especially if they're babies, we're talking, 4 years old, especially pre-K and K, and then as the years go by, the percentages fluctuate, right? So the second year, it's 80% Spanish and 20% English, 70-30, 60-40. So by the time they are in 5th or 6th grade, you have what the literature would identify as a true 50-50 model. So here is a little bit of a comparison between it's either a 90-10 or 80-20 model and the 50-50 model. What teachers found in some of the districts where I was working was the fact that if you wanted to oscillate and move back and forth, it created a little bit of a problem when it came to literature classes, because the narratives and the structure of the English language and the rules of what is considered appropriate in English do not necessarily match with Spanish. So if you started a narrative on Monday in English and then you continue that same narrative on Tuesday in Spanish, it didn't really mesh well. So then in one of the districts, they decided to keep it by subject, right? So let's say math was taught entirely in English and science was taught entirely in Spanish. So they would have a dual language program, but it was separated into subjects. So once again, it's not a one size fits all. And I wanted to make that very, very clear, because when they first started, it was like, it's going to be 50-50 for everybody. Well, I don't think that would be fair, to be honest. So I'm going to share with you a couple of examples where the kids were confused and the teachers were also confused. I have found that the teachers that were working for the Spanish dual language program, they were not really that proficient. They had not grown up in a Spanish-speaking country, so they had not been exposed to content and material in Spanish. It was very, very simple. It was almost like a BICS, a basic communicative skills that they had with the Spanish language. But it takes a very, very high level of sophistication to be able to teach trigonometry, right? Trigonometría en español, or química orgánica, right? Organic chemistry and inorganic chemistry. To be able to do that at the high school level, it takes a high level of skill. A lot of the teachers that I was working with really were not proficient. They were not fluent in the rules of accentuation, which was a big problem. Also, the rules didn't cross over as well. So for example, in English, the double negative is a no-no, but in Spanish, that's okay. When you had the kids talking about a story and they had to develop a dialogue, right? You would show that with quotation marks in the English language. And they were doing the same with the Spanish language, not realizing that that is not how you indicate dialogue in Spanish. You have to have a hyphen. So these are just a couple of the examples that I wanted to mention. Also literal translations, which caused a big headache, or idiomatic expressions that do not translate well. So I wanted to share a little bit of the cultural norms of language use that we started implementing in some of the schools. And I would also be more than happy to share with you a monograph that I co-authored with Dr. Angela Carrasquillo, who was my former professor and my former doctoral dissertation mentor from Fordham University. Everybody more or less knows about the theory of dual language program, but this is basically like a recipe book. It's about 40 pages. It's a relatively easy read about the steps that you need to implement in order to make sure that this is successful. So it was important for the teachers to realize that in Spanish, the writing samples had fewer sentences, but they were longer sentences, and they are run-on sentences. Once again, in Spanish, this is okay. In English, it's really not. But I wanted to also make sure that the teachers brought in authentic material, not the translation. So one example I could give you right off the bat, I don't have the copy here with me, I can't locate it. I won't mention the publishing firm because the intention is not to make them feel bad or to bash them. But it was a cute story about Peppa Pig. All the kids love Peppa Pig, the cute little piggy. And it was in Spanish. And the title of the story was El Hada de los Dientes, which is a literal translation of the tooth fairy. So once again, the cultural aspect was completely missed. Anybody that knows anything about the cultural aspects of Latin America, from Mexico all the way down to Tierra del Fuego, know that in these cultures, you don't have a tooth fairy. Basically, when the kid loses a tooth, it's a little mouse that goes underneath your pillow. He drops an envelope with a little cash. I see Dr. Lynn smiling, and they take the tooth. So the culture needs to be a strong component of the curriculum. Let's see, here I have an interesting analysis for you. So I have two definitions of chlorophyll, right? They're taken from the texts verbatim. I did not make these up. They are academic texts, both in English and in Spanish. And people would say to me, wow, the English sentence is a little bit more than 2 lines. And the Spanish version has 4. Does that mean that they were adding words? And the answer is no. It's not that you're adding words, but it is the way the language is. And it's impossible to find translations of the text. People wanted to do, let's say, brown bear, what do you see? And they wanted to do the same thing in Spanish. Oso pardo, ¿qué es lo que ves? So I remember working with some of the school districts in Yonkers and in Rochester. And I asked the teachers, can you tell me where in Costa Rica the kids see, bears, or, where in some parts of, Central and South America, the kids are exposed to bears. So once again, you could have a lesson in science, but you need to make it relevant, right? And maybe talk about the rainforest and what types of animals and creatures you'll find in the rainforest that do not necessarily coincide with the brown bear story. So phonemic awareness is crucial. Sound recognition. Once again, it was trying to implement an English model into the Spanish component of the day. And I was in a variety of schools where the kids were tapping in Spanish, and that is not the way you teach. Spanish is a syllabic language, right? And you go through the ma, me, ni, mo, mu, and the pape, pipu, and the tate, pito, and the sase, si, so, su. It is through syllables, right? And that is how you create words, and then those words turn into sentences. So the reading strategies and the writing strategies that you have for English do not necessarily coincide with the Spanish. So where was room in the curriculum for the teaching, especially at a little higher level for the kids that are now writing sophisticated pieces. They needed to know the rules for accentuation. Also, if you're familiar with the way classes are conducted in Central and South America, they use el dictado. There's a lot of dictation. You don't normally find dictations in English-speaking American classrooms. So once again, it was a question of following the format and trying to stay true to the model as closely as possible. Here's an example of a word wall in the Spanish language that would not necessarily look identical to the English language, right? So the way you divide the verbs into the AR, the ER, and the IR, ar, ir, and you give the kids examples. And also teaching them the proper conjugation. So once again, la pared de palabras, the word wall, and you have the consonants and you have the vowels, or you could divide it into subjects. What is the terminology that you find for the circulatory system? And the beauty of doing science in Spanish is that the kids also get exposed to little tidbits of the English language, and they get to learn about, why it's so crazy, because there is a strong base that comes from Latin and Greek. And a lot of students don't know that when they're speaking English, they're also speaking Danish, or they might be speaking Sanskrit. So you give little tidbits, and every day it would make it really exciting. So when they would talk about the word divine, divine comes from deva. Deva is Sanskrit. So kids would really get a kick out of all of this. They found it really, really interesting. So once again, verb conjugation is really, really complicated in the Spanish language, right? So you have the past, el participio, and it's important for them to see that. The teacher can also become a what I call a cross-linguistic bridge, so to speak, and bring in, I don't know how you feel about translanguaging, but this is now becoming very, very popular in many school districts. So translanguaging was coined by Dr. Ofelia Garcia, who used to work at Columbia University, and then she transferred over to the CUNY Graduate Center before retiring. And a lot of people have mixed feelings, but if done properly, you're giving the kids, I call them my kiddos, but you're giving the kids the opportunity to experiment with the language, and they may not have the sophisticated skills to give you an entire sentence in English. So allow for this to happen and create that bridge and introduce gender. So for example, in the English language, we don't have that. So the word the, right, the article, you have the definite article and the indefinite article, but the is only one in English, and the equivalent of the in Spanish would be four. You have el, los, la, and las, because you have gender, right? So you have el mapa, los mapas, the map, the maps, but it is masculine gender. And then you would have, for example, la flor, las flores, right? The flower, the flowers, las, because it is feminine gender. But then you have irregularity. Mano ends with the letter O, but it's la mano and not el mano. So once again, teachers could go back and forth with something like that, and bring in the fun factor. Once again, I'd like to mention the issue of culture, because I remember being in some of the schools specifically on January 6th, and I would do it on purpose because I wanted to see if they were paying tribute to El Día de los Reyes, Three Kings Day, which in Latin America is a huge deal. And a lot of the teachers that I worked with felt very, very uncomfortable because they were concerned about mixing, bringing in religious aspects. And I remember telling them that it doesn't really have to be religious. You're giving it a historical background as well. And you're paying tribute to something that is really a big deal, because in many, many Latin countries, Three Kings Day, the Epiphany, is celebrated more so than Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So cute little cultural traditions like, leaving your shoes outside, a little bit of grass for the camels to come by and feed, right? Get fed, throughout their journey of delivering little presents for children. So once again, bringing in that cultural aspect, I thought is something that we tend to ignore, and we have to make sure that we do bring that in. You cannot separate language from culture and emotions. I would even find that with my with my graduate level students at my previous institution of Adelphi years and years ago. These students would take courses in Spanish and Italian. They would speak in Spanish and Italian, yet when we went to visit countries, they did not understand why people eat so late. And these are direct quotes, by the way. Why do they have to have dinner at 10 o'clock at night? Because that's the way it's done in parts of Spain, and especially in Argentina. They have late dinners. And Dr. B, they're asking me inappropriate questions. Well, it's inappropriate to you because you're looking at it from the lens of, let's say typical Anglo-Saxon backgrounds, right? So you might feel that they are being intrusive, but to them, they're just being curious. They want to get to know you a little bit more. So there's no issue for them asking you about your age. And I know that in American culture, you don't do that. You don't ask a woman her age. You don't ask people how much money they make. You don't ask people, how much money they have in the bank. And even though we are a capitalist nation, we do not talk about money. So that would also confuse the students, even the ones that are studying English as a new language, ENL, right? They would say, well, it's a capitalist nation. Why can't I ask people about that? Because it's considered, politically incorrect and inappropriate. So once again, these are things that you're not going to find in the textbook. This is something that the teacher has to bring about. One of the things that we started implementing in a few of the school districts was following Margarita Calderon's research of language exposure, right? So she would indicate that the kids would need to see the word 12 times. They need to hear the word 12 times. They need to say the word 12 times, and they need to write the word 12 times. Not in succession where it's boring, right? Community, community, community. Not like that, but throughout the day, you could have an exit ticket. And that is how you build the knowledge. And you put the student in a situation where they're using the new term, moving above and beyond the typical spelling tests that I would still see prior to COVID on Fridays, right? And we give these spelling tests of 20 words, and the kids would have no problem, and they know how to spell adolescence, SC. Come Monday morning, it was all gone because they passed the quiz on Friday, and it's we just took it away somewhere. So once again, making those connections, and on Monday, backtracking a little bit, doing a little bit of a revision, so to speak, a review of what was covered the prior week, and then you start your session. Making sure that we get these kids involved, making sure that they use the language. They have to speak the language. Try to avoid yes/no questions, even if it's a one-word answer. Accept it. It's not a problem. So here's an example of dictionaries, glossaries. They could have their own, now that we're doing things virtually, they could have their own portable word wall, if you will, with little folders, and they're all going to look different because each student has different needs, so to speak, right? So I'd like to emphasize the idea of a thematic unit, whether it's in English or in Spanish. And the beauty of teaching in a thematic unit is that you get the chance to recycle the vocabulary. So you're looking at, let's say, the rainforest or the topic of turtles or the planetary system, but you're looking at it from the angle of mathematics and literature and science and music and art. So in a way, there's a nice flow between subjects. Kids are interested in dinosaurs. They like monsters. We could talk about the weather. So comprehension strategies in bilingual programs. It is important to make note of the fact that you would like a slower rate of speech, but it has to be natural. The enunciation, whether it's English or the other language, has to be clear. Making sure not to raise our voices too high. Offering students a simpler version of a sentence. In my graduate courses, I tell my students to focus on Hemingway. Very short, concise, simple sentences, as opposed to Edgar Allan Poe or Virginia Woolf, right? If you take a look at Hemingway, it's relatively simple. You don't find too many adverbial clauses, which is something that they tend to trip over, especially when it comes to the NICESLAT testing, right? Just like you have word walls in English and in Spanish, I would recommend to some of the teachers, and it worked beautifully, have an idiomatic expression wall. In the English language, for example, and a lot of my students were floored when I mentioned this, you could divide it into categories, and nobody ever thought about that. And they would say to me, Dr. B, how did you come up with this? And I said, well, I'm a nerd. I've been doing this for over 30 years of my life. But in the English language, you could divide it into the categories of color, right? So you have the black market, or you have Black Friday, red tape. Unless you specify it, they have no idea that you're talking about bureaucracy, or having a green thumb. A lot of the kids assumed that that was a terminal disease, you know, gangrene or cancer. A green thumb, that's disgusting. And why would the thumb be green, you know? And what about all the other fingers? No, it's not something I want. So you need to make sure that you clarify. Having a green thumb means that you have a knack for gardening. You love to have vegetables all over and different varieties of flowers. And once again, put the kids in a situation where they are using that new terminology, so they become familiar with it, and they don't translate directly into Spanish. So another category could be body parts, right? When things are expensive in the English language, you pay an arm and a leg. So in their minds, they're translating literally. It's like, wow, okay, an arm and a leg. I thought they used dollars and quarters and dimes, an arm and a leg. And if that's not complex enough, folks, keep in mind that you could also pay through the nose. Now in Spanish, when things are expensive, you also use a body part. But things in Spanish that don't cost an arm and a leg, and you don't pay through the nose, they cost an eyeball. So I've got the right pitch, the right tone, the right intonation, and the right pronunciation, and it sounds completely absurd, really. Oh, wow, so these earrings, right, I paid an eyeball. Estos aros me costaron un ojo de la cara. So once again, translating idiomatic expressions literally can cause a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of problems. So I know that we're coming close to the time when we're going to have our Q&A, but I've got a couple of more slides I'd like to share with you. How do we implement an authentic assessment of a bilingual program or a dual language program? We need to have writing samples in both languages, not just English, folks. It has to be the English and the other language, whether the other language is Spanish, Arabic, Russian, Bengali, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It will give you an idea as to where the kids are, because you don't really get boxed into one category for a long time. It's a temporary parking lot, as I like to call it. And it is possible for you to be entering or emerging when it comes to your speaking skills, but perhaps you are expanding when it comes to listening comprehension, or maybe you are commanding when it comes to reading or writing, right? It all depends, but it oscillates. You're not boxed in one area, and it doesn't necessarily coincide. You could be entering or emerging with the English, but you could be expanding or commanding in Spanish, or vice versa. So it's important to have that in mind. Creating audio tapes for the kids, or videotapes, where they get to hear their input of L1 and L2. So to me, this is more authentic than the teacher saying, you did a great job. They may not believe us, but with an audio tape or a videotape, they can actually get to see where they started in the month of September, how many new vocabulary words they have acquired, let's say in a matter of 60 days. Is the vocabulary expanding? Do they feel a little bit more comfortable with their pronunciation? So once again, even in the English language, bringing in aspects of phonetics and phonology, morphology, syntax, pragmatics, verb conjugation. We don't tend to do that. Very, very few people know that in the English language, we have a little over 30 verbs that are considered regular, right? Meaning that they all end in ED, yet we have 3 different pronunciations, because you have the voiced and the voiceless. I'm not going to get into that right now, but there are different ways that you can actually teach this to the kids. So, the past of walk, walked, talk, talked, wish, wished. It's a sound because it's voiceless, right? So you could play with the vocal cords. That's what I do with the tiny tots. In verbs like sign and love, if you place your fingers here, you'll feel the little vibration. So the past tense of those would be a d, signed, loved. And then the third category, if it ends in a t or a d, with speaking, it is an id, translated, decided, right? So once again, these are little tricks because they may not know. And just telling them, repeat after me, or the kid will say, I walked to school, I talked to my mother. No, it's talked, it's walked. Why? Because I said so, I'm the teacher. Not really. You got to give them the rules. I've also done really cool experiments with kids that are experimenting with the language, both L1 and L2. And error analysis seems to be quite similar. So I've heard toddlers tend to think, and these are from American households, so they are English dominant kids, they tend to think that all the verbs are regular in the English language. They are adorable, right? Walk, walked, talk, talked, go. I goed to the movies with my mommy. So they get exposure, right? That the passive go is went. But once again, these are things that take time to develop, and it's also practice. And I think that this is something that we can talk about now with our reflection. You can talk to me about a unit that you put together. I would like to hear about your experiences with that unit. What went well and why? What surprises you about your own teaching? What surprises you about your students that are learning? And what improvements or what changes would you like to make for the future and why, right? So like Dr. Ling, we're talking about making modifications and with COVID and all of us, now teaching virtually and really moving into the 21st century. So I'm going to take a quick pause right now and take a look at the chat. I see that there are four messages. Oh, and I'm going to bring this up. Thank you. Okay, El Ratoncito Pérez. Thank you, Lorianne. I love it. Yes, the little mouse. The little mouse. Oh, the name of the researcher, Margarita Calderon. I'm going to write that for you right here so you get it. She was at Johns Hopkins University, and now she is traveling all over the country. She does amazing presentations on dual language, including the 2 states that are not attached to the continents of the United States. She does a lot of work with schools in Alaska and Hawaii. Yes, Charlotte Calderon, Margarita Calderon. So we give everybody a little chance to, process. It's a lot of information.
Well, while people are I'm sorry, I think I heard some kind of echoing. Okay, while people are still processing their thinking, I want to thank Dr. Buttaro for this rich, informative introduction of this dual language program framework. I actually have a lot of burning questions for you, but I do want to open the floor for people first. As I have promised everyone. But since right now I don't see any question right now, so I would like to, take advantage to ask my own questions.
Sure.
Yes. So my first question is, the program model you are introducing, of course, it's grounded in research and evidence. So even though it's mostly focusing on the Spanish English dual instruction, I'm sure it can be explored for other language instruction as
Absolutely.
well. And I like what you say that the consideration of design or choosing a program should be situational, and students' demographic should be taken into consideration. But here is a question that I think is particularly grounded in our social reality in the United States. As everyone knows, our country is very culturally and linguistically diverse, and where very few neighborhoods can neatly fit into a profile where only 2 languages were spoken by its community members. So what would you say to administrators or teachers who are serving linguistically complex populations and who want to value, honor, facilitate the students' fluid and dynamic bilingual, multilingual language and identity development, both inside and outside of the school, and who may think bilingual and dual language program built on the policy of language allocation have little use for the community that they are serving.
Okay, lots of questions there, Dr. Lynn. So let's tackle one by one. In my experience with the schools that were not necessarily dual language schools, but they had a dual language strand, if you will, a dual language program. And when I would go in as a consultant and offer the workshops, it's almost as if it was a separate entity. So let's say you had a model where it was side by side, meaning that, you know, you share the students, right? You have one group of students, and then your colleague is doing the other language with the other group of students. Across the hall, you would have monolingual classes taking place. And it was quite shocking to me as an educator, as a researcher, as a professor, to hear the teacher saying, you know, I don't, and this is a direct quote, by the way, I don't understand why they're speaking in Spanish, or I don't understand why they're speaking in, you know, Arabic or Russian. So when I would meet with the administration, with the principals and the assistant principals and the directors, I would say, you know what, we have to keep this open to everybody. And when I offer workshops on Mondays or, you know, Tuesdays, like, you know, Marvelous Mondays and Terrific Tuesdays, depending on the school district, don't make it exclusive where it's only for the dual language teachers or only for the bilingual teachers, because everybody else may not know what's going on. So even though they may not be fluent in the language, even though they may not know a lot about dual language, but they may have something at home that they can share with their colleagues. So let's say you just got back from a trip to Mexico and you have this awesome sombrero. So you could bring it in. And once again, it was about sharing. I would encourage people that were not completely fluent in the language to greet the students in a variety of languages, right? So, you know, buongiorno, bonjour, buenos dias, comment allez-vous, you know, little things like that. You know, xie xie, it makes a big difference because people feel validated. They had flags of the countries that represented the children in their own classrooms. And I wanted to create a school-wide initiative. So as soon as you walk in, we arranged everything. But then again, it takes a while. You don't do it, you know, in a matter of days. It takes planning. You bring people on board, you know, because you want them to feel vested in this. We would decorate the hallways with all of the flags representing all of the nationalities, not only the children from, let's say, Central and South America that were in the dual language Spanish-English program, but we had flags from Russia. We had flags from Yemen, you know, we had flags from Germany. They even brought the Italian flag, you know, in honor of my heritage, even though we didn't have any Italian speakers at the school. But, you know, something cool. Geographic literacy is another way that you can add, because it's an element of fun. So you, in one of the walls, you would have a huge map of the world, and with push pins or with thumbtacks, all leading to New York, because we all came here, right? With different color strings, what was the place of origin? So in my case, it was, let's say, from, you know, representing my mom and dad, it was a string from Italy in Europe and another string from Argentina in South America, both leading to New York. So it created this beautiful sense of geographic literacy. Oh, wow. Okay, so your family is from Poland, and where's that located? Because we really don't teach geography per se as a subject as they do in other parts of the world. So it was a great way for the kids to see where everybody else was coming from and to create this sense of appreciation and respect. It was all about appreciation and respect. You want to bring the community on board as well. So once a month, because they were only doing it at the beginning of the school year, but then with one of the school districts in Queens, I remember speaking to the principal about this, and it was an experiment because, of course, you have to plan for this, and it takes time and energy and money, but we wanted to have monthly meetings with all the parents. From the English speaking side and the Spanish speaking side, because they really didn't know each other. And of course, we created an environment where people felt comfortable, you know, sharing their anxieties and the fact that, hey, you know, I don't know Spanish, and my kid gets homework in Spanish and I don't know what to do. But then again, maybe pairing up with a parent who was fluent in the language and vice versa, maybe having some of the parents from Central and South America, you know, get together with children from the English dominant group, so to speak, and work on projects together, you know, school-based projects, thematic units, you know, moving a little bit away from the typical pen and paper, multiple choice test formatting. I wanted to also go beyond the typical Cinco de Mayo, where we would, you know, bring in the typical food and music and attire. Culture goes beyond food and music and the way people dress. It's about your emotions. It's about, you know, dating rituals that vary from country to country, marriage rituals that vary from country to country. So it was important to also talk about that as well. Maybe recipe sharing, where you could have a combination of science and mathematics, because now you're talking about measurement. Or, you know, the grandparents, bringing in the grandparents, el Dia de los Abuelos, to share about tradition, and maybe a skill that I don't happen to know, but I admire, things that are handmade, things that are embroidered, or crochet. And, you know, to have these people come and give us lessons on something like that was such a delight. It really was a delight. So I'm hoping I was able to tackle components of your question, Dr. Lynn. I'm not sure I did. I hope I did. If not, let me know.
Yes, you did it so beautifully and actually beyond. So yes, the dual language can play such an important role in bridging the gap between the school and communities. Like you say, inviting community engagement and involvement, bring the parents and bring community to involve in children's education, and have to be the school-wide initiative, and but also actually incorporate into the school curriculum. And your model kind of show us how this can be done on the everyday teaching level, you know, to integrating culture into the content and the language learning.
In one school district, we even emulated the spelling bee contest, right? They had it in English, but then we also had the spelling bee competition in Spanish. The parents were tickled pink because it was such a delight. And then, you know, Hispanic Heritage Month was also really, really cool. So once again, bringing in little components, and like I said, it takes a lot of planning, but it can be done. And if we have the patience to be able to say, hey, you know what, this is a little more challenging than what I thought. Also letting the administration know, and this was one of the snacks for me. I do want to make sure that this is spoken of today, at least mentioned. But when they had to do formal observations, and in one of the schools, the assistant principal did not master the Spanish language, and he came in, let's say, on a Tuesday to observe the teacher teaching, and it happened to be Spanish Day. The expectation was that you drop everything and you convert it into English. And I will never, ever forget one of the little girls, sharp as a tack, brilliant. And she looked at the teacher and said to the teacher, why are we switching languages? You know, she said to the teacher in Spanish, hoy es martes, y los días martes nosotros aprendemos en español. ¿Por qué cambiamos a inglés? So basically she said, you know, Tuesdays are the days that we study in Spanish. Why do we have to change everything into English? So I remember saying to the VP, the vice principal, assistant principal, you know, I'm not here to tell you how to do your job, obviously, but if you are going to do a formal observation, then change the date, right? So why don't you come in on a Monday or a Wednesday or a Friday of that week when you know that the instruction is in English, because the teacher to drop everything and all of a sudden, you know, off the top of your head, change and translate in your mind as you're going along, that could affect the evaluation. And I wanted to make sure that that was something that was taken care of. Also, the professional development, when it was time to really work closely with these teachers, the PD was done in the language other than English. And the teachers were amazed because it was a wonderful opportunity for them to practice higher level thinking skills and academic language, other than working with, you know, children in kindergarten. But now you're talking to an adult, you're talking to Dr. B, we're talking about curriculum planning, we're talking about, you know, sequencing, we're talking about the essential question, but we're doing it all in Spanish. So that was a good twist. That was a good twist. And we even had a visit from one of the superintendents that wanted to stop by and see what this would look like. And of course, the school received all the kudos. I was just the guiding channel, the outsider, you know, helping them to make it happen. But I wanted them to walk away with the congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Due to the constraint of time, we must conclude today's webinar program. Again, today's presentation was titled Guiding Principle and Best Practice for Dual Language Education. Thank you, Dr. Buttaro, for your dynamic talk. And thank you to everyone for spending your time with us. So please take care and stay safe. And I look forward to seeing you at our future Nice Teaser webinars. Ciao, everyone.
I would love that. Just so you can get to see, Dr. Land, one of the candidates wanted to have a follow-up webinar. They found this very informative and helpful.